Welcome to Success in Motion. Join us as we dive deep with top leaders, entrepreneurs, and professionals, uncovering strategies to grow, scale, and succeed.
Welcome back to the Success in Motion podcast. I'm your host, Alex Burho, and today we're going to be joined by John Riggs. He works as a strategic projects for M&T Bank, and he's also a retired lieutenant colonel after 24 years as a Marine Corps infantry officer. So, John, thank you so much for joining us today.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
So, can you go ahead and just give us a little introduction about what it is you do at M&T Bank, and we'll kind of go from there.
I would say the easiest way to describe it is strategic projects. Enterprise level projects, we focus on those. Probably another way of breaking it down is three business lines or more, and we go around the bank. We may touch every part of the bank. I went from commercial to other wings on different projects that are needed. So we're sent over to kind of help organize, structure those. Sometimes they come out of regulatory requirements, right? And sometimes internal requirements within the organization. And we go run those to help drive strategic outcomes.
Yeah, that's awesome. Now, I know a big part of your history was, again, being in the Marine Corps and everything. I would love to hear a little bit about your history. Tell us a little bit about your story of serving and kind of that transition.
Yeah, so I spent 24 years in the Marine Corps as an infantry officer, as you noted earlier. I came in 1998. Pretty standard career path, command level assignments to the platoon company up to battalion level. And then I had staff assignments. And I think a lot of those skill sets that you learn in the Marine Corps, and sometimes they're not known in the corporate world. You have a lot of folks that do solve a lot of hard problems, lead folks through a lot of challenges over your career. So I had a couple combat tours as a company commander. I think we're really defining moments in my life, having the opportunity to lead, great young men through probably, I mean, it's the pinnacle of what you do and why you join the military and combat operations. So that was for me, the pinnacle of my career was being able to lead them, and it really means a lot to me to this day. Then I had other assignments. I had a Pentagon assignment, which a lot of times you're kind of kicking and screaming to go to those. You don't want the staff jobs, as we call it, but it was I learned a lot in those assignments. I worked for some great people that really mentored me and helped me further my development. I think to this day have helped me to go into this strategic role. So looking back at where I am now and having that opportunity to work in that capacity, it was reporting into the Deputy Secretary of Defense, and working in that office helped me, I think, shape and maybe make the transition to this job, because whether it's you're dealing with the Department of Defense or you're dealing in banking, I'm usually 1,000 miles wide and an inch deep, if you will, on projects, and you're really synchronizing, organizing folks from different, we call them business lines in the bank, but different, functional areas in the military, whether it's your, J1, J3, operations, logistics, aviation, to come together to meet a common operational or strategic goal. So I think that really being able to be there in that, very important high pressure situation helped me transition to this role when I left the military. You still are always, I think you've never arrived. I think that's kind of an attitude you had. And I kind of always felt the Marine Corps did a good job of that, in that, each rank was built that you did, operational time, which we call the Fleet Marine Force, where you're leading or operating. Then you had a secondary B billet, we called it, where you went and was more shaping, whether that's working at Parris Island, training recruits, something that I did as an officer and overseeing that, or, leaning in on reserve units as another secondary billet. So I had those opportunities that, developmentally, then you would go to school, right? So for each rank, you had a different school. Marine Corps Command and Staff College is one that I attended. Advanced Artillery School, which at the time, even though I was an infantry officer, the Marine Corps thought was best for me to go to understand fires. But you have those developmental things. So I've tried to replicate that as I've gone into the banking world. I pursued my MBA when I left, got my MBA because I wanted to be able to understand that corporate speak. And I think you've always got to be thirsty. You got to be hungry to learn more. You've never arrived, as I always say. So it's been good for me. It's like kind of having another chance to start over, like kind of I have experience what I did as a second lieutenant, but I'm starting over again and having these, coming with this, a lot of experience I can bring to the bank, but you also have to understand the organization, understand the language, understand what you're doing. Even if you're running projects and you're maybe not the subject matter expert, like finance or other folks in the room, but you need to understand a little bit of that. So I think that experience over my career helped me make this, transition. And it was something I was interested in, right? So
Yeah.
leaving military, I was always kind of understanding economics, kind of fuel conflicts, right, around the world. It was something I got into, and then banking and finance and the market became very interesting to me. It was a fit that I wanted to get into when I left.
Yeah, that's awesome. And I love how you mentioned you've never arrived. You're always being very thirsty to learn and grow. Well, what other skills or characteristics do you think that you have that has made this transition easier or helped give you kind of that extra edge?
I think there's a couple of things. I think in the military, you have to learn resiliency. You have to understand, that you may not see the light at the end of the tunnel, but you got to push through it. And a lot of times in projects, it's tough when you start a project. It's a lot of chaos. At the strategic level, a lot of times when my office comes in, we've been asked to come in. It's either starting off or there's the unknowns, and getting folks together, haven't worked together and building that team. And I think that was one thing in the military that was always there, where you're getting a new unit, going to a unit, standing up a unit, or that next deployment, you have a lot of people leave, you get other people in, and trying to build that team together to accomplish a goal. I think it's kind of the same in projects. That's another skill set that I think from a leadership standpoint, you have to bring in and understand how to work with people and understanding, there's functional areas. Everyone's not the same, right? And I think if you use a one size fits all leadership, I used to call it in the military, doesn't work. So I have a knack of when I meet somebody, I usually, I want to know everything about them. I want to know where you're from. I want to know, how you grew up, what you studied in school, what you did for work. I want to understand all those dynamics. And I think it was because from the day one in the military, something in the Marine Corps that we would do, whether I had a 35-man rifle platoon, understanding each one of those Marines, getting to know them, but understand what motivates them, right? How to relate with them, and to get them to do great things. And I think it's the same thing in projects, working things, getting to know your stakeholders, getting to know them, personal level, where they're from, what motivates them, how to relate with them, and to get the best, results and success. So I think that skill set came out as well. Of course, I went through Marine Corps Tactics and Operational Group, which is kind of I would say it's our operations officer school, but it's also an operational planning teams. We call it really project management school, which on steroids. We use different terminology in the Marine Corps planning process, but it was a national fit for me to come across and lead projects, from the beginning. So I think those things really helped me make this transition. I was able to sell those things too. And a lot of folks don't understand that when you're leaving the military, you got to sell yourself, and it's hard because you've been a selfless person, right? Everyone else comes first, especially as a leader. And then being able to brand yourself and sell yourself and look at your skill sets, it's like, how can I contribute to this organization? What do I have that I can bring in that can help? And at the end of the day, it's really, can you help manage risk? And can you help somewhere be that cog in the wheel that helps turn profit? And those are the things that I had some folks along the way that helped me, understand that. Some guys who had already left the Marine Corps, who have been, a couple have been successful and led me in the right direction. I think there's a lot of other assets out there that helps translate that, for military folks that are sometimes looked down on. And I've heard mixed results, but I had a great results with American Corporate Partners. And then I had a mentor that was great. He was the vice president of the railroad who really helped guide me and steer me into corporate world. And I also had hiring our heroes who, and everything from resume, building a good resume for me and translating my skill sets, but also working with me on interview skills, right? Which we think that we're great orators and presenters, but there's a certain skill set to changing your experience and selling yourself. So we all have a lot of skill sets, I think, especially after a long career in the military. It's just selling them. And I think sometimes we just want to less rest on our laurels. Like, hey, I did a lot of hard stuff. I did a lot of great things that you did, but it doesn't always translate right to folks. Like, how does that plug into our corporate? How are you going to bring those skill sets in and be a value to us? Besides that, I was just a leader, and the corporate world has a lot of great leaders too that maybe never touched a uniform. I found that as well. So I think we have a lot to offer, but we also have to humble ourselves again. And how do we build ourselves to come in to join that next, corporation, or like we would in the military unit? How do I become a successful part of that?
Yeah. And I really like how you're focusing on, hey, really be able to highlight your qualities and highlight what you did do in a way that applies over. Now, for anyone else who is making that transition from military to looking to find a good job or the next steps, what other tips or tricks would you have, or how would you recommend that they present themselves better? Just what other tips do you have for them?
I think there's a couple of things. One, I think you can't have one foot in the door and one out the door. You've got to go full out and make that commitment when you decide to retire. And you should make that understanding with the impacts on you and your family. And that's something that you really want to do. And once you make that commitment, work with your command, whoever, that I am retiring and I've given the nation this much time. That's what I did. And please give me the time back. And I was fortunate that my command, I was at Marine Central Command, did that for me at the time. And because there were a lot of us that retired out of there, and I was very fortunate for that. And then humble yourself and start looking for resources. I think sometimes we're a little arrogant, and I was at the time that I've got all the answers. I can fix this organization. I can really change this organization. You may bring some assets, but you need to assume that, okay, what can I do that can help translate my skill set into coming in and getting educated and do everything that I can help that organization, MBA, PMP, masters in project management. I mean, that's some natural things for combat arms officers. They don't know, but they've really, at some point, staff work, they ran projects and done it at the highest level, and they just need to translate it into civilian speak in the way that you can come in that corporation. They know your value. But I think humbling yourself and then looking for those assets out there. There's a ton of assets out there. And I'm not just talking about the typical transition assistance program. It tries to check the box with what DoD wants, but there's so many other assets and people out there that are willing to help you if you'll just listen. And I think one of the most important things I did was I felt like, oh, I can interview well, I can talk well, I have good interpersonal skills, I can sell myself. And one of the most important things I did was humble myself to with hiring our heroes. They linked me up with a hiring manager she'd been working or as a hiring manager over 2 decades for Charter Communications. And she did mock interviews with me and she taught me some of the most important skills. Basically, like understand the role that you're coming into, know it backwards and forwards, and how each one of your skill sets translate into what they're looking for, right? So be able to speak to that. Know the background of the company. The company I work for now, it was a conscious decision. It wasn't by chance. I did research and I looked into banks and I saw the history of M&T Bank, though a regional bank, up and coming. I knew it. I'd been lived in the Northeast, but it also was a company that, through economic downturns since the 70s, it never posted a loss at the time and done really well. So that speaks to me like, hey, they're probably doing something well in culture. And then you're going into Glassdoor and you're reading other things and hearing other people's testimonies to say, hey, this is a great company. So I think you have to kind of know what you want to do, understand what kind of skill set you have. If you don't have them, go get it, right? Take that time and use that to your advantage. And I think some folks, that's fine if they choose to do this. I use my GI Bill to invest in myself. I'm like, hey, if I can use this to invest in myself and have a good job on top of my retirement, I can pay for my kids' college. I'll drive them to, try to help them to get scholarships or do well in school. That's always the goal, to set your kids up for success. But I think it's also investing in yourself, right? So having that, I was able to get a master's in human resource development, and then an MBA with my 3 years of my GI Bill. So I came pretty equipped to be able to talk, employee relations, understand employees and understanding business. And I think that helped me land a job that's been, a great fit for me leaving. Had I not had that and just trying to sell, hey, I'm a leader, I have a master's in military studies, nothing wrong with that. But how do I translate that over, right? And they
Yeah.
also see you as a person who's willing to learn and grow and come into their organization who's going to contribute, right? If you've got that kind of drive, I was working on my MBA at the time and I was a candidate on my resume, but they could see that, right? And it was kind of called out like, oh, so you're working on your MBA. How much longer you got? And I think that helped to see that I was still trying to learn and transition and do that. So I think those things are important. Humble yourself, try to have that, understand to get assets that can help translate your skill sets, look for additional education, and also be resilient. As resilient as you were in the military, you need to be resilient in this career choice because I was 9 out of 10 times, you go on LinkedIn, you think, oh, I'll get this job, I'm a great fit. And it doesn't happen, right? You don't hear anything back. And you're
Hmm.
just casting that net, right? Trying, and you're coming up with nothing in the net every time, use an analogy of fishing, but you're bringing nothing back in. And you got to be resilient as you were then because it gets really frustrating, right? And a lot of times we've been fed this, I don't want to call it a lie, but thing that everyone's going to suck you up. You've done all these great things. You're a combat leader. In my case, you've managed, a lot of people, and it doesn't always happen, right? And it's very humbling at that aspect. And some folks, it's very psychologically crippling for them to continue to move on. And I wanted another challenge. I could have checked the box and maybe went into defense contracting. Nothing wrong with that. Or going into, government position within DoD, within here in Tampa and Central Command or Special Operations Command maybe would have been an easier fit for me and some of my skill set I could have brought over. But I wanted a new challenge, right? I wanted to go in the corporate world. I wanted a new something to rejuvenate me. And I'd had my time in the military and you know what I can bring over from that, but also you know continue to learn, continue to grow. So I think you got to be willing to have a thirst to continue to learn, continue to get better. Don't rest on your laurels, and be hungry to do something new. And with those challenges, it should fuel you. It keeps you young, So
Yeah. So, what would you say has been kind of your motivation or the reason that you have such a big thirst? Because I know some people can sometimes make that transition. They're like, well, I'm retired. I don't really have a big desire to do more.
yeah,
Where did you find that fire? How did you cultivate that fire?
yeah. I think it was just like, hey, I'm still young. I felt like, and there's another life, another career, and another challenge. I think it's was always in the Marine Corps, like, what's next? What's the next objective type mindset? In the military, you're really moving from every couple of years to a new assignment, right? And you're having to step up and sink or swim in some ways. And that challenge is always there. And where's that challenge going to be when you leave? Are you going to just go and assume a position where maybe you don't feel like you're contributing enough or for you personally. So I think nothing wrong. Everyone has their own thing. There's nothing wrong with just retiring if you have the financial wherewithal to do that and just focus on your, other things you want to focus on in your life. If you want to fish every day, that's fine, or do whatever. But, financially, where I wanted to live and be, eventually in my life, it wasn't there, just on my retirement. Um, and I thought, what is the next chapter for you? What is that next challenge? So I think it's just something personally for me. I think a lot of us all have it. Like, I can do this, right? I can succeed. This is interesting to me. I'm going to learn something new. I'm going to contribute. I'm going to be part of a great organization again. Just like, I chose the Marine Corps because I looked when I was, coming up and looked at the history and was proud of the history. I was proud of that organization. I think you do the same thing with maybe where you land. I mean, sometimes you take what you've got, but I've had other folks who've steered that way too. I started looking around the gamut of organizations and where I want to land and what kind of role I want to be in. How am I going to contribute? So there's a personal satisfaction in that for me, of doing that and still being someone who's, I feel like I'm not wasting, assets or things I have. I can still contribute for me and build relationships and do good things. So it's been another challenge. I enjoy it. It's been a steep learning curve, but I've really enjoyed it, and I've enjoyed our organization. We have a lot of great people, so I think that's it. One thing I will point out to folks that I discovered as I went through interviews, when I did make it through interviews with companies, and I had a retired sergeant major told me this, and I think it's very true. You can tell a lot about a company and how, when you interview them, how they treat you. And I've heard that from other people. That's something I would say is you're transitioning and how they treat you in the interview process. I had one company that, I won't go into, but wasn't great. And, you look into their culture and they have a high turnover and other issues within there, but, known brand. And it was not it turned out for the best not to go that route. Even though it might have, you seem like that's an organization that sounds like it has a lot of prestige. It may not be someone you want to be with. But when I went through our bank, the folks that I related with, I was actually going to end up working with in our quote unquote chain of command. They were really, good. It wasn't easy. They asked me hard questions. They were prepared. But they were also very polite, good to me through the process, and the organization was. So I would tell anyone who's transitioning, keep that in mind as you go through as you interact with that organization, you may have a certain optic on them as a customer or consumer. And then when you start to go through the process, is like, is this how, if they're treating me like this through this process, is this somewhere I want to work, right? Is this something I want to be associated with? And I can say with M&T Bank, the way they treated me and the interview process and the way I've been treated since I've been a part of the bank has been consistent. It's been good. It's with dignity and it's very much about, treating their employees well. So I think I did well where I ended up, and I've been happy with my choice.
Yeah. And that's awesome. And sounds like it's been a really good fit for you. And I love that, really focus on making sure you know what you're getting into. I want to build off something you mentioned a little earlier. You said, you wanted to create that financial life that you were hoping and build upon that retirement you already had. I know some people, as they transition out of the military, they're looking towards the future and looking at creating possibly different streams of income or creating passive income. What have been your thoughts on, just building multiple streams of revenue and building up your future as much as possible?
So it's interesting because as you go in for me, and don't I'm not a certified investor, so please don't anyone quote my investment advice. This is just me personally how I felt. But for me, was looking at what is the most important thing coming out. So I've got a good, I think compared to a lot of folks, you got a good retirement, consistent every month stream of income coming in. How does, that pay that you're getting? But the other part of that is you're now invested in a company that may have stocks that do very well. What does that's another option of looking at. Um, and how is that going to build into your financial future, which our bank has always done pretty well, in our stock prices. And then the other thing is, how much are you willing to contribute? Like, can you afford? So I can put a little bit more, and I've got a company that's, 5% 401k matching, and I can put in each time I get a pay raise. And how frequent are those? Can I continue to contribute more? And then I can catch up that delta. So if I plan to work 15, 20 years more, what will that look like? Right. And so I'm coming in and maybe I'm not, you know, I'm hauling in a pretty good, additional income, but I'm also taking a good chunk of that and I'm putting it in my 401k. I'm investing some of that, which a lot of times you'll either get stock options or you'll be able to get in, buy in at a reduced rate as an employee with a lot of corporations. And I'm augmenting with that with if you've got with a good solid organization that's always had a steady return and a good stock price, you're diversifying and doing that. So I think that's something good. And then on your own, I mean, I think there's nothing wrong with going on and setting up your own investment, diversifying, learning, educating yourself, and having that other investment portfolio where you're going and buying into ETFs and other things. So that's kind of my strategy, what I do with my, additional income and other things I've got to do. And, it also gives you a lot of financial stability, going on that you're not just relying on your retirement. You've paid off a lot of all your debt, and you've also got you're looking down to this nest egg that you're building that's more important probably than, in some ways the additional income that you're getting from this other job. But also look at that, right? Look at those benefits when you go, not just the return of the paycheck every month, but what are those other additional benefits? Oh, am I getting stock options in a lucrative organization that has been around for a while and I think it's going to do well, and it's going to pay me dividends, or I can use the cash out someday and retire early, maybe. in addition to my 401k. Is that something else that I can layer in there that I can do? So those are some things I looked at. And I think another thing that's highly underrated in our bank does a well job. When I came in, I had 25 days of PTO a year starting out. And then I had the option after a couple of years to buy in more, an additional 5 days, 30 days. And unlike the military, I can, tie those onto a weekend or holiday and extend it out. And I don't have to, stretch it over and lose those. So that's a huge thing having that time off.
Awesome.
It's a day on, stay on. You're not getting the 96 all the time. And banking, which is nice if a lot of times it's federal holidays, the banks shut down. So you get those holidays too. So that was something else I looked at was having that time off with your family because you've been going a lot in the military. There's that worth too of picking a career where you have that balance, right? I know guys have got into sales and they're doing great. They're going a lot, and they're making great money. And maybe their job is okay, I'm going to plow through this for 5, 10 years shorter than maybe a 15, 20 year career after the military. But I'm able to take that money and then I'm going to retire early, but I won't have to suck it up being gone for a while. But do you want to give that up for your kids if they're in grade school, junior high, high school? I don't know where they're at. So that's another factor you try to balance, right? Because in the military, mission comes first. You got to go. Not that it doesn't in the bank, but the requirements of being gone all the time aren't as much, right? For business travel for some of us. That's something else you have to balance in that career. Like, what do you want with that work-life balance with your family? And does the organization you have, is it going to give that to you, right? You don't want to jump out of the frying pan into the skillet again. Maybe you do, but with that next role you have when you leave the military and you're going just as much, like, are you gaining something from that? Unless it's a short-term fix to, I think, generate a lot of income,
Mm.
and retire earlier and be completely done. So there's a lot of things you have to weigh, right? It's not easy. It's not a perfect just fix when you leave. And I try to sit around in that couple years. I wasn't just right away. I was plotting out, like looking down the road, like, well, how can I set myself up for success, and thinking about these things. That's not being selfish. It's not taking away from the mission, but at some point, it ends, right? It ends whether you don't get promoted, you hit 30 years, you have to retire, something happens, right? And it's going to end for military folks at some point, and you need to have a plan, and you have to take care of yourself and your family. And at the end of the day, um, you know, your service is great, but I can tell you in the corporate world, people appreciate it with me, but they don't give a damn what I retired as, right? A lot of guys get tied around, oh, I'm going to be this, and people care. People really don't care. They don't care. There's general officers that get tired into directors' boards and can use it as consultants, and some of us, but it really doesn't matter, right? If you can't translate that skill that I retired as a lieutenant colonel, no one cares, right? And what you commanded. It's interesting to have a conversation over a beer and maybe translate some of it on your resume to how you might be able to contribute to that organization. But if you think it's a novelty that they just want to hire someone because you were, a colonel to hang out with, it's not going to probably happen. Maybe some of that in defense contracting to have someone at a certain skill set level that can relate, but in the corporate world, other roles, I haven't seen that, and no one cares. And it hurts to say that to a lot of folks because you worked hard to get there, but you're starting all over again, and it's not, no one really, from my perspective, really cares. And in a way, it's a good thing, right? Again, humbling yourself, not resting on your laurels. That's not going to carry the day that I was a lieutenant colonel, and I did X, Y, or Z in combat. It might help me, internally, but the organization isn't going to use that as something that's going to, do anything when you leave. So I think you just have to keep that in mind. It's brutal. It's honest though, right? You got to be
Yeah.
honest with yourself.
Yeah. I love that. Well, John, you've given lots of really good advice. If someone wants to reach out and learn a little bit more, pick your brain a little bit more, what would be the best way of reaching out to get a hold of you?
I'm on LinkedIn. You can't miss me. You'll see, Jonathan Rigg and M&T Bank. I have my contacts on there. My number and my email is on there. So just reach out. Feel free. If you're on LinkedIn, you can also message me. I think that's how you and I met initially. You
Hmm.
reached out to me, and I'll respond. And if I can help anyone, especially our veterans, let me know with that transition. The biggest thing that you want when you leave, no one's going to give you a job, but what they can give you is an opportunity, and you just have to close the deal. You got to do it. No one's going to give you anything. So I would say if you reach out, I'm willing to do whatever I can to help, to try to help give people opportunities. So yeah, please reach out, and I'll do whatever I can to help you.
Well, again, John, thank you so much for coming on here and sharing your tips and your tricks and all the things you've learned with us. And yeah, we appreciate you being on here.
Hey, thanks a lot, Alex. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. And we will catch everyone on the next episode.
Thanks for tuning into Success in Motion. Want to share your story? Visit successinmotionpodcast.com/guest to apply and be featured on the show.